right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. Welcome to folks who are online and attending via Zoom. So we're really excited about today's presentation, which was partially funded by a Carla Summer Graduate Research Assistantship that Mabindra and Blanca applied for. So our presenters today are Mabindra Regmi, who is a PhD candidate in the Second Language Education Program, and he's here with his faculty advisor, Blanca Caldas, who is Associate Professor in the Second Language Education Program and also in Elementary Education. And the title of the talk is Exploring Language Socialization and Language Identity of Migrant Nepali High School Students in the United States. So welcome, Mabindra.
Thank you, Kip. Let me change the slide. Oops. All right. First of all, I would like to thank a few people. For Blanca, who was my advisor, mentor, and a shoulder to cry on sometimes, if things get pretty sticky, right? And Carla for funding the summer research program. Okay, and as Kit mentioned, it's about language socialization and language identity of the Nepali migrant children who come to United States with their parents and evolve over time here in their educational, cultural, and social experiences. So it's a personal story, by the way. Okay, so these are my children. That's my son 11 and my daughter 8, just after the Tihar festival. And I thought this picture is relevant because they've been here for about a year now. And they were not very excited about this festival, which was very near Halloween. And they were more excited about Halloween and getting candies and wearing all those costume and all those kind of things. So I was thinking, probably they are a little bit shifting in a way, culturally. And even in terms of language, and especially my daughter is kind of forgetting a few things, so the structural connection when she's speaking in Nepali, she's losing touch in some of the words. So I thought that would not happen. I would make sure that they would retain that, but it is happening. So I think it's a pretty, obvious, inevitable kind of a reality that most migrant children face when they come to a different place. And more importantly, I was thinking about how they socialize linguistically out here, and how do they construct their identities. So these are the two areas that we were interested in, and Blanca said, okay, Carla would be the best place to explore this thing. And here we are after a long time, in fact. So when we think about language socialization, we think about, the practices that we carry out within a particular community where we kind of ask our children to kind of involve themselves, in an appropriate manner, and then we impart the values and beliefs and theories about our own language communities. But the question out here is, because these migrant children come from a very different space, so what does it mean? Because they have these two communities. We have this host community out here, and they have their own heritage community. And they have stories, values from both ends. So what does it mean for their language socialization process? So that was one of the fundamental issues that we are trying to explore. And the other is identity theory. Sorry, the identity. Berg and Stitz mentioned that identity is about regular adjustment in your environment, and further along you move on, and you will have a more comprehensive change in your identity. But that is in one particular locality or community. So what happens when you think about transnational migrant children who already have one set of identity or their belongingness, and then they move into a totally different space, and how do they negotiate these things, which is a radical shift from their own initial reality. So that is something that we wanted to explore. All right, so let me try to unpack this thing, okay, and move on to the next slide, which is where I'm heading towards. So we have language socialization and identity, which we are approaching through interactions with these children from the migrant children from Nepal. And we're looking into two aspects, their language use and how they construct meanings in their discourses. So in terms of language use, obviously there's a heritage language and there's English. So what are they going to use? When are they going to use that thing? Okay, and how are they going to use those languages? So that is something we explored through this study. And even when you're talking about English, what kind of English? Is it the English that they came with from their heritage society that they're going to use, or they are going to kind of, affiliate more closely with the type of English that they encounter here in the host society? So that is something that we tried to unpack through this study. And this meaning making is a little bit more complex. At least I found it a little bit more complex to unpack, because when you're trying to make meaning out of the interactions, there is this, at the surface you can see people interacting and all those things, but there are other elements influencing how they create that meaning, how they make that meaning. And Blumart talks about these scales, sociological scales, which kind of contribute towards making meaning. Just a second. So one of the elements, there are many elements, so I'm just trying to deal with a few of them, okay, as an example. So historicity. So what happened before? How does that contribute to make or create meanings out of in the interaction? Or, you have this localness where the interaction takes place. And what about the non-local elements, the translocal elements which influence in creating meaning? Like I was thinking about, when a Nepali child comes to America first, and you ask them, "How are you?" and invariably they'll answer, "I'm fine." And it's a small thing, I didn't notice it that much, but when I came here, many of the people, when they reply, they say, "I'm good." So it's a small thing, and I'm fine, I'm good. But it talks a lot about, local and translocal, kind of influences when we create meaning. So if you say I'm good, probably you grew up in America or some parts of America. So if you say I'm fine, probably you didn't. You probably went to UK or, British English influenced kind of societies. So that was something we were thinking about. And the other thing that Blumart talks about is the value, value of the language that you use. When Nepali migrant student comes to America and speaks in Nepali, they have a very limited scope. Their family members, their language community members, very, very small community. But if you use English, you have a wider scope, and probably it's valued more. And that is the perception that was mentioned in Blumart's sociolinguistic scales. But the thing is, and I was wondering whether that is accurate for migrants' children. The thing is that, yes, they will be able to speak Nepali with a very tiny community, but is the value less just because they reach out to only a small community? So that was something that we are trying to unpack, okay? And basically, this is what we thought of, okay, when we talked about traditional scales and moving on to scales, re-envisioning scales for transnational or migrant population. So traditionally, we have these defined concepts of historicity, intertextual resources, and indexicality. And when you think about transnational or migrant students, So how does that affect them? Because these intertextual resources or historicity belong to somebody else. It's not theirs because they come from a different space. So will they or should they be allowed to create their own, frames or scale frames to create meanings, or do they have to follow the, scale frames of the host society? So that was something that we wanted to unpack. And obviously, in the host society, the higher order scales of what is assumed to be the better way or the correct way is owned by somebody else. Okay. And there's a belief that these migrant communities are guests in this society and they are not able to create their own scales of frame scales or scale frames. And I think that is something we need to look into if we really want to understand the reality, linguistic and identity realities of these migrant children. And how we talk about these layered context, norms, and indexability and other meaning-making process. These children will have their own sources. These children will have their own kind of explanations or frames in order to create that. So that is something that we want to unpack. Okay, now this was a question I was asked some time back, so why another study? We've had so many studies about, transnational students coming to America, losing their language, losing their heritage, and so on and so forth. So why another story? Sorry, another study. And yeah, that made me wonder, why another study? I can just take some literature and then figure, okay, this is it. So why go into that thing? So I thought maybe, okay, so if you look at the glimpse or the picture of what Nepali population is like right now, so the first Nepali person to get a permanent residence in the United States was in 1952, pretty recent, okay? And till 1993, there weren't many people. There were 296 cases of people who got their permanent residence. And suddenly it exploded. In 2019 alone, more than 10,000 people were granted permanent residency. And that is amazing. Like it kind of just exploded, And each year we're adding that. We've got about 10,000 students coming to the United States from Nepal every year. And that's a huge number. So the thing is that now we have a kind of a sizable number of people, students who are going to schools in the United States. According to the US Census Bureau, there are about 18,500 students who are of age in between age 5 and 18. So I'm assuming they're going to school out here. And we have got these children of, students like me. Okay, my children are not counted in this thing, and other undocumented people as well. So there should be a sizable number, and it is increasing. And most of these children, what we call 1.5 generation migrants, they were born in Nepal and then they traveled to America again. And they are kind of continually negotiating their linguistic and cultural identities in the host society. So the thing is that probably a study like this could be a place marker. Okay, so I mean, if somebody in the future was to ask, what happened, and then probably we'll say, oh yeah, this is what happened, and this is how our children kind of, let's say, I mean, I don't have a better word, assimilated into this society, okay, or blended into this society. It would be a place marker. Okay, this is what happened. You can refer back to it. And we can learn from other communities, like different communities like Bangladeshi community, Indian community, Chinese community, Korean communities, who came here and then became US nationals, okay, and they acculturated into this space. And we can learn and find out what went wrong, what went right, what we can do with our children. And that is something that I thought would be important. And I believe, like my children that I said in the beginning, most of these migrant children are in a very confused kind of space right now. And if we have a proper study, or if we build inroads through studies, probably we can develop strategies so that their experiences, especially initial experiences, will be more comfortable and smooth. So that is the reason that I want to give again. And I went through some literature which talks about loss of languages, and which talked about, like initially the children wanted to move away from their heritage language, but later on they wanted to reach out to their heritage language. That often happens, when your identity is questioned, when you become an adult, and then you kind of revert back to these things. So, retaining can be important, probably. And most of the parents probably want an intergenerational transfer of their heritage language and cultures and identities. But at the same time, they also want them to be Americans, be proficient in English. So we have this kind of oscillating, contesting kind of language ideologies that is going on. And some research is also indicated that teachers can play a very, very influential role to provide that space. That is the place where we can provide space for these students to retain their languages, okay, use their languages or their cultural identity as a resource, and create a better additive kind of situation. So, all right, so it brings us to the situation where we believe that if we have additional languages, it is beneficial. So I think most of us agree with that. You learn many languages and then it's always better. And also in professional spaces, it could be beneficial. Like I remember down in Texas one day, I was visiting my friend who has a shop. And then there's a white dude who came into the shop. He was selling things, okay? And he talked to me in Nepali. He just gave me a phrase in Nepali, okay, not talk to me. But I felt really close to him, right? Like he just said, he's my dear friend in Nepali. And then I felt immediate connection. So it can be a tool, for progressing yourself. And at the same time, like Oja mentions, there's a kind of a contesting ideology, like we talked about earlier. So how do we address that? Basically, when migrant children from Nepal, or any migrant children who come to the United States and adopt English language, they have an emergent language identity, which could be English only, which could be mixture of heritage and English language, both equal. Could be, diminished heritage language and more proficient English language. So all these realities are possible, okay, basically. So I we wanted to figure out what is going on. So normally we look at it from adults' point of view when we are talking about, language and linguistic realities. So we thought maybe we want to look from children's point of view. So how do they feel? So we always ask the teacher, how do you address, these multicultural, diverse students in your classroom? But we never, we ask children less, I think. And especially if that child is from less commonly spoken language like Nepali, it's even less. So we thought that we would go from that direction, and so 3 areas that we wanted to talk about is how was the initial, experiences in school, especially in the linguistic space, and how do they view their own heritage language? What do they think about it? Where do they use it? And basically the third part was to do with identity. How do they make sense of their own identities? So we had, this is a pilot project, I guess. So it's not a very comprehensive project, and it's just a pilot project. And I want to see how far we can go and where can we go further from this space. So that's the basic objective of this study. So there were 4 students who migrated to United States as a child. They were here at least 3 years and they're studying in high school. So these are the participants that I chose. So I did an online interview with semi-structured questions, and the interview was transcribed and analyzed. The thing is that I tried a second round of interview with one of the participants, but I found that everything was a kind of, repeated over and over again. So maybe until and unless I have a specific area that I want to focus, probably I'll stick with one interview right now and then move to that space later on. All right, so these are the pseudonyms of my 4 participants. These are Nepali names, okay? Anita, Bimala, Divya, these are girl names, okay? Female names, and Chetan is a male name, basically. So Anta is in grade 9. She came to US when she was 4 years old. Bimala is in grade 12, and she came when she was 8 years old. Chetan is in grade 12. He came when he was 7 years old, and Divya is in grade 9, and she came to US when she was 12 years old. So the findings indicated a kind of a mixed feelings, as we can assume. Okay, so with during the initial experiences, they felt that they were supported, and they felt that they were not supported. They got their weird vibes from their teachers. Okay, I mean, these are expressions mentioned by the participants. And regarding the heritage language, I talk to my parents in Nepali, but like if I talk to a Nepali peer in Nepali language, that would be awkward. That was interesting. That is something that I want to follow, actually. That was a very interesting moment. Why? That was something that I want to follow. And regarding identities, participants mentioned something like, I'm a mix of both. Some part Nepali, some part American, which I think is very valid. But some participants were very adamant about their own Nepali identity. And that was something that I would want to discuss a little bit later on as well. So no matter how American I try to be, means I'll always be a Nepali. So that was kind of a feeling expressed. These are expressions by these participants. Okay? All right, so let's start from the beginning, the initial experiences, schools. I love it, I hate it. I think that's true for most kids anyway. Okay? Nothing new in that idea, this ambivalent feeling towards school. But the reason I think is quite different. So Anita mentioned that, like teachers will not understand what I was saying. And then like the students will repeat, it's just saying that. And then they'll say, oh yeah, you're saying that. And initially she did not feel that she was being treated differently, but she thinks, okay, this is her expression, that when she was around 4th grade, she thinks that she was being treated differently. I explored a little bit onto that, why, how, kind of questions, not very precise or explicit answer, but like she gave something like, she was a little bit rude, the way she answered. I'm like, it was different than the others. Okay, so that was something that she felt. And Bimala, she felt very nice about the whole experience. The teachers were very nice and sympathetic, and they tried their best in order to, kind of accommodate her into the classroom. But when you look at one of the things that she mentions, I started speaking more and learning more English. Then I started making more friends because I could actually talk. That is a very powerful thing, So only when she could, probably she knew English before that, but I could actually talk. Has a very deep kind of meaning out there. And I thought I wanted to unpack that a little bit, okay? And some kids are going to be like, oh, she looks different, or she doesn't talk in English. That's a weird, and certain expectations. So I was thinking, okay, so this is my thought, okay? So based on Anita's experience, she knew English, she could talk. I mean, like if you don't look at her face, then she could talk like any American kid. Okay, her pronunciation, everything. And then the assumption out here, the scale frame is if you know English, then you are in the higher order place. It's the transaction is more valued. But it's not only that, and because she felt that even though her English language is pretty good, uh, that proficiency was discarded in a way by the host society or members of the host society or somebody. Okay. And so, how does she make meaning out of that particular experience that she had? So, the traditional meaning making process is not working for her. So, we need to modify a little bit. Probably, how do we integrate these transnational identities into the meaning making process? So, I mean, like, I'm keeping everything open, okay, right now. And the idea of actually being able to talk is I think, a presupposition. There's a certain defect in the way the language is used. And I think that is pretty pervasive in all societies, especially out here. So what do we do about that? Should we consider that her language skills to be deficient, or create a different frame where we can explain her linguistic abilities in a different way and create a different kind of meaning? So these are open themes that we kind of can explore. Okay. All right. So we have Chetan and Divya talking about similar things. Okay. Like, I wanted to only learn English, wanted to go to the library and be able to read in English, that desire for, to be able to do that. And believe me, these people came with English language. Okay? It's not that they didn't know English language. They came with English language. They went to schools in Nepal, which are English medium, and they came with English, but still they somehow felt that it was deficit. And this example from Divya, I think this is something worth looking into. I was called on, and then like the class started laughing because of my pronunciation. But yeah, after that, then like that was when it went downhill. Or else I was pretty like confident until that particular incident. So one single incident kind of shook her confidence, and she felt somehow that her language ability was kind of not enough. So that is a pretty conflicting moment for her, I think. She thought she was very good in English. She is. She went to a very prominent school in Nepal, and her English is immaculate, believe me. Okay, I mean, like especially for those kids from those schools, that particular school. And somehow she felt that because she made a mistake in pronunciation, everybody laughed, and then she felt that she didn't know English. So that was a very turning point. So because we have a certain frame to explain, create meaning, whether somebody is good or not so good in language, I think that is creating the problem. So we need to maybe redefine it a little bit. Okay, now heritage language use. Regarding heritage language use, most of the participants, they express that they talk with their parents in Nepali, like here, like Bimala says that. And if they talk to peers, they talk in English, which is I think something strange, because they are Nepali. Okay, they know Nepali language, they talk in Nepali at home, but when they talk to each other, they talk in English. So that's a really unusual and interesting development, I think I saw within the Nepali migrant communities. So what is it that is driving them? What kind of frame that is driving them towards that language? That is something that I wanted to find out, because probably they believed if you speak in English, then it has greater value, probably. So that was the value thing, higher order scale that Blumart talks about. And it's, I think, similar with Divya. So only two people responded. From the discussions we had, and Divya also said something very, very similar. It feels awkward when I start talking in Nepali with Nepali peers because I feel like they are just going to get weirded out. So there's this feeling that if you talk in Nepali with your peers, Nepali peers, that would be a weird moment. And that is something that I want to explore further, actually. I mean, I haven't explored in this study, but there's a follow-up thing that I want to do after this thing. So basically, the initial feelings are ambivalent, okay? And then, so we have certain assumed scales, okay, frames. And then because we have got the host scale frames and the heritage society scale frames, these people have to jump from one to another, okay, when they are talking, when they are experiencing their language experience. So that is something I thought emerged out of this study. And the other thing is, how can we create these negotiated scale frames to address their realities, which I think does not exist that much. Okay, so to create a meaning making process for them through certain scale frames for these transnational students is lacking. I think I won't say it doesn't exist, but is lacking a little bit. So, and then they are all over the place, confused, okay, and that is something that I noticed. And when we talk about the identity, so this is the other half of the study. I mean, 3 of the students said that they were strongly affiliated with a Nepali identity. And I will try and unpack why maybe they said that, okay, later on. But these are the expressions, you know. So if someone asked me, I would say that I was a Nepali. She was here since she was 4. She doesn't remember many things about Nepal. I don't think she remembers anything about Nepal, for that matter. But still, she felt that she's a Nepali and not an American. And she says something like, I was born there, birth, okay, and, special longing for that place for some reason. And I think it's tied very closely with family. And when we move on to Bimala, I think Bimala kind of expressed a more realistic version of that identity. I feel like I'm a mix of both. Again, I'm not as Nepali, but within somewhere I'm a Nepali. But people don't see me. I mean, when people look at me, it doesn't seem as if I'm a Nepali, but I am. You know, so that was the kind of thing that she explained. So I think there's a strong desire to fit in the heritage identity frame, and I'm not sure why. Because a lot of the people who come to America, when they go back to Nepal, if you look at it from the other perspective, okay, they would like to connect themselves with more American identity. That is the norm. But here, it's really opposite. So that is something worth exploring further, I think. Okay. And Bimala accepts a mixed identity frame. I think that is the reality most of those children face anyway. All right, now we have a very different explanation from Chetan. For some reason, he says that no matter how American I try to be, I'll always be a Nepali. And I explored further, why would he feel that? And there were a few things. I was born in Nepal, so country of birth, and mainly religion. So he talked about religion as a binding thing. And then I asked him, because he's a Hindu, and religion is not something country specific, it can transcend national boundaries. And his perception was, as soon as you say you're a Hindu, you'll be considered an immigrant. So that is what I think is pushing him away from the the host society identity. So, and that is something, and he said, I have accepted that fact. I mean, like, it's sad in a way, young man who came here when he was 7 is now 19, probably 18, 19, and been here for about 10, 12 years, grew up here practically, and still feels that it doesn't belong here. So that is in a way, it's a sad kind of reality that he expressed. Uh, but that was that. And Divya also mentioned that she, because of her parents, family, traditions, cultures, she feels more Nepali. The thing was that, sorry, I'll come back to this slides in a while. So I felt somehow the family, culture, and food kind of triggered a more sense of a heritage identity. And when they talked about school and society and lifestyle, okay, it kind of triggered a sense of more, host society identity. So I think it's a kind of a mixture of both the worlds. And I would like to give an example of how Bimala, one of the participants, enacted the shifting identity. So it is pretty interesting. So I am a mix of both. Obviously, my family is still like, we still practice the same traditions. We don't call myself, I'm not as Nepali I used to be. Obviously, then the only thing I knew was Nepali when she was a child. I am, a Nepali, So these are the kind of expressions that she said throughout the uh, interaction. Obviously, I prefer Nepali food. So I'm like in certain places she used obviously quite a lot, to stress that she belonged to that particular frame. And I wouldn't consider myself a fully Nepali when she was talking about school things again. And one of the things that she feels that she's not Nepali enough is because during the festival she goes to school. And I think that has a very deep meaning. Like my children during that festival went to school, went to their after school work, came back, and we did that thing in the middle of, not in the middle of the night, but late in the evening, that festival function. So probably if we were back in Nepal, we would be doing it early in the morning. So I think that is also kind of detaching themselves, making them detached from the heritage identity and towards more host identity. So this is a kind of a example snapshot. Okay? So, I mean, there is a sense of identity, heritage identity, and the host society identity, and it is being guided and influenced by larger social frameworks. Okay, and they can be either family or society, and their sense of identity kind of oscillates. That was something that I noticed again. And one of the things that I felt, I talked with Blanca quite a lot about this thing because I am a Nepali. I interviewed them. So probably they wanted to show that they were Nepali. And if somebody else was taking the interview, probably they would show that, no, I'm an American kind of thing. So it could happen. And I think if I pursue this study, probably I would want, other people to interview these children so that we might get different answers. Who knows? I guess, and then we can analyze from that perspective as well. And in some cases, like in Chetan's case, the exclusionary attitude of the host society, that's how he felt. Okay, so I'm not saying that that's what happened, but that's how he felt because he's somebody, they will not accept me as American. So that is also pushing people away. So it's interesting. Linguistically, you are closer to the host society. Identity-wise, you are trying to move further from the host society. So that is an interesting kind of development that I felt. Okay? So summarizing everything. So the migrant children use their own perspectives to make sense of their linguistic and cultural spaces around them. So that is one thing. They negotiate the social frames of both the heritage and host societies. while experiencing their emergent, linguistic realities, and they navigate the complex identity influences or scale frames, and they create a set of meaning-making process, which is a blend of both the worlds. So this is something that I took away from the study. So they are capable of creating these scale frames, and they are creating that, whether we accept it or not, okay? And they create meaning, make meanings in their own ways based on their own experiences, which lies in both the worlds. So that was something that I took away from the whole study. So what does it mean to the educators? Ultimately, this we wanted it to be something significant for the educators. So what does it mean? So there are 3 points that I thought maybe can be important for educators. So the migrant students, they experience the whole linguistic and social spaces differently than the regular children. And probably we need to modify our, assumed social frames in order to kind of integrate these or make an inclusive kind of environment for these students or children. And the linguistic realities are often kind of, conflicting and shifting, changing, because they've got multiple languages, and then one language is diminishing most of the time. And I think if you, as a teacher or educator, if you want to create a space where they can retain their heritage language, probably classrooms acknowledging the languages in the classroom and making use of the language in the classroom can help quite a lot. That is something something that I noticed in one of the projects that I'm involved in, a translate project, where they are using translate activities to include less commonly used languages, and that is showing a lot of impact where students are kind of emerging I mean, like, if their language realities are acknowledged, they feel a sense of kind of achievement, and that is something being seen out there. And of course, a child who's transplanted from one social space to another has a very complex sense of identity. Who am I? Am I Nepali? Am I American? I'm neither. I'm both. So this is the kind of complex identity construct that is going on. And I think, okay, they're already going through so much confusion, and if we help create spaces where we acknowledge their confusion, even if just acknowledging their confusion and telling them, everybody faces this thing, so let's move on. I think that would mean quite a lot than just sticking to our own spaces and saying that no, this is it, and this is what you should be like. So that is something that we thought are the implications for the educators. I think that's all. Thank you. Sure.
So from the very beginning of your presentation, I was kind of struck by the role of family. Mm-hmm. You talked about that a lot when you talked about the findings, and you mentioned it in the background part about their parents' ideologies about Nepali language and culture. So I wonder if you were to pursue this research, how you would kind of get at the family piece and get deeper, get sort of richer data from the students themselves to talk about the influence of family and maybe how you would involve family in your data collection. Have you thought at all about that?
Yes, I have. Actually, in one of the instances, I took the interview of the parents as well. So it was not part of the study's scope of the study, but I do have that data. And then I think their ideology of what should be is very, very influential factor in how the children think of their own identities and the language situation as well. And if the parents think, no, you should have, you should retain heritage language, probably they will retain. And if the parents have, kind of a cool attitude towards, you can learn whatever you want, then probably they will move away from heritage, language, space, and culture and everything, I think. But thank you so much. Like that is something that I intend to do. Like I was suggesting me that we need to look from multiple perspectives and figure out what is going on. So to corroborate this study. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like such a salient feature for many migrants and immigrants
Mhm.
to other countries because they're so connected. Their family is their sort of social unit as they try to integrate into these new culture. And also because of the age of your participants, it seems like that influence is going to be even greater, right? Because they're still living at home.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. So that's the next step. So I'm planning to take this study further. So this was a kind of a, I mean, spearheading in one particular space, and then like probably I would use other analytical tools, beyond scales because it's a limited tool. So even Brumard said that it's a limited tool. It is, I mean, like crucial but limited. So we need to explore beyond that. So probably when I move further in this study, probably I will look into more different varied participants as well as different ways of analyzing the data.
Well, I was struck by the dialogue, not the dialogue, you use certain excerpt from the interviews and the use of obviously, and I was looking at that and all the examples of that and how that can be can have different meanings. Obviously, to me, in that sense, is the way that children or teenagers either affirm something or saying it in a, I don't know how to explain it. It felt like this is the answer that you want. Yeah, you should see it, but it doesn't mean the reality. Obviously, they eat food. Obviously, they practice Nepali language at home. It's obviously it's dumb. That's the thing, the job.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that that's something that they are integrating that in their identity. That's something that you obviously see. Again, the word obviously, but not necessarily they is part of their identity formation. They may be also rebelling against that. That saying that obviously it makes me think of the possibilities of these processes and these scales being visible but still latent and emerging.
Yeah, I mean, like I was also going through some kind of reflection in that particular word. So, does it mean what I think it means?
Exactly.
And maybe I want to see something out there, and then I saw it, and then probably when I have reactions from other people like here, probably I'll redefine how I approach that particular word interplay that the participant used.
And something can be lost intergeneration. Like it's something that is a code for something else. Teenagers use, and maybe your generation, my generation may not understand fully. That's something to explore how teenagers frame themselves in a different way than, for example, the research done with teenagers in similar context 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and how they are framing themselves in non-deficit, where they are very clear of where they are, even within that ambivalence.
Absolutely. I mean, like I would admit that I wanted to get answers from this study, and then like actually more questions were raised, and I'm thankful for that because now I can see it. So now when I have interview sessions with them next time, I know what to ask, which areas to explore. So I'm so thankful for Carla. They gave me this opportunity to kind of permeate into this issue because I didn't know anything about it, and a lot of things came up, and a lot of suggestions came up, and like you said, you're telling me right now, the way they perceive their realities, it's something that I can delve into deeper the next time I have conversations with them. maybe I can have a group session with these participants and then see how they interact, among themselves. So that would be interesting, point of view as well. So a lot of things to do still.
That was actually a piece of your findings that I thought was interesting about the students saying that they didn't like to speak Nepali with their other Nepali classmates, that it felt weird to them to do that. And, so like getting them in a group would be really interesting to see what that interaction is like, to see what kind of code switching they're doing as they interact with one another. And it also got me thinking, you were talking about that one implication about creating a space for students to be able to draw on their linguistic resources and sort of use translanguaging as a strategy. But I wonder how comfortable they would be with that. If they're uncomfortable speaking Nepali with other kids who are Nepalese, and if they feel like other students are noticing that they're different because they're Nepali speakers or because they look different, will they embrace translanguaging as a strategy, or will they reject it? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, like that's an interesting perspective, and I would like to bring the Translate project ideas again, the findings from that project, and the students were not very comfortable in carrying out their Translate activities, where they had to translate back and forth in their heritage language in English. But however, there were certain moments which triggered, really amazing, exchanges, interactions, which reached out into their, cultural background, let's say, resources, and their identity resources, and metalinguistic, approach to understand or comprehend the content that was being dealt with at that moment. So I mean, like it was pretty. And like you said, they were not. Why in Nepali? Okay, we came to America to study English, but still that happened. If the teacher took the time and patience to create that, trigger that event, and it led to a very meaningful conversations and explorations. So that was something I found from that particular project. It might not apply everywhere. It might be one particular case, but like if we carry out more studies, and then we can see a pattern, then maybe it works. I don't know if that's the answer.
No, I'm just curious. It's just food for thought. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much for presenting this research, and thank you to all of you for coming today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
so much for presenting this research, and thank you to all of you for coming today.
Thank you.